Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
Happy Hump Day, everybody. It's Sports Daily. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor, Jad Chambers producing. We are with you for the next 2 hours. Glad to be here on KFH, on our video streams here for Sports Daily, which you can find on YouTube, on Twitch, and on Facebook. All kinds of fun stuff coming up for you today. The IHOP hotline is the place to be, brought to you by IHOP, where guests can enjoy 4 new sweet and savory biscuit options, because you can chime in on the show, but you can also win lots of prizes. We're, prize central here on Sports Daily. It's kind of a thing we've adopted here over the summer, and we'll continue it through the fall, and we love it. But you've got a chance to get movie tickets today. Tickets to Bert Kreischer, the comedian, at Intrust Bank Arena. Tickets to the Wind Surge on this final homestand, and some HTO. So really happy to be able to do that. Keep that IHOP hotline handy. In fact, let's keep people on their toes. I don't think we've done this before, Jad. So right out of the gates here, right as we open up, let's give away some Wind Surge vouchers. Home games just through Sunday here. 869-1240 on that IHOP hotline. Let's get that train going early. And Jad will hook you up with some Wind Surge vouchers. Good for any of the remaining home games. 869-1240. Tommy and I will be looking ahead to the weekend of football today. We've got Kevin Saul, Wichita State's athletic director, joining us at the top of the hour to talk about all things Shockers during this now fall season. Feels like fall outside. Certainly, as we have football back now in full swing, we're coming down to the nitty gritty in Major League Baseball. We've got all kinds of goodies coming for you on the show. We're happy to do that. Tommy, how are you on this Wednesday? I'm feeling good, man. You get outside, you take your morning walk. There's that crisp in the air. Football, 5 nights a week. Here we go. Let's go.
Yeah, it feels good. I know you've got little kids. I know a lot of our listeners have little kids. I left the house this morning with both my 2-year-old and my 4-month-old just screaming their heads off. And it was one of those situations where I was like, you know what? I got to go. I'm going to leave. I'm going to go to work. Sorry, honey. It's all on you. But I'm going to head to work, and I'm going to enjoy the nice crisp air and look ahead to football this weekend. So I was glad to get out of that situation. I'm glad to be here today. Looking forward to getting into it.
I've got if you're watching on our video stream, I have this Rangers shirt I'm wearing. It's funny. It's like way off center, which you can see here. So this was, I have, a couple of Rangers shirts. This was one my wife got me, and we were really excited about it. And I was like, oh, this is so great. And I don't send food back at restaurants. Like I don't do any of that. I'm like, I'll deal with it. It's fine. So I get this shirt. I'm like, oh yeah, it's awesome. And then like a long time after, I was like, that's like way off center. And she's like, oh my God, why didn't you tell me we would have sent it back? I'm like, oh no, it's fine. It's fine. So it is also baseball season, Tommy, and the Rangers have finally pulled their heads out and are playing respectable baseball again, although Max Scherzer got hurt last night. But, the Royals play a doubleheader. Bobby Witt Jr. continues to just go ballistic, has really turned into one of the best players. We are at that time of year, too. Royals fans may be ready for that to end for this season. But there's all kinds of good stuff going on here as we will get closer. I mean, it's September 13th. We're moderately close to the start of college basketball season. Definitely want to talk to Kevin Saul about, how things are progressing with these Shocker basketball teams on both the men's and women's side. Now that, they're together and practicing and on campus and all that. We'll check in on volleyball. We'll learn about, the bowling announcement that they had and what that might mean last week. They're adding women's bowling as an official sport. Just a couple questions I have about that. But it is that time of year. Of course, it's high school football season. We're really excited about it. But, football dominates this time of year, Tommy, for all of us, really. And we have, 3 very interesting and intriguing teams to sort of follow along this fall. And, it was unexpected last year to some degree because we didn't expect Kansas to be as good as they were. This year it is expected. We expect Kansas State to contend for a Big 12 title. We expect Kansas to maybe sneak into the mix, but at least be one of the top half Big 12 teams, which makes them absolutely interesting. And we expect the Chiefs to, win another Super Bowl. So it's sort of that time of year, and we'll take a little time today to go through all three. And all three have, moderately interesting matchups. A road trip to Missouri, K-State, pretty heavy favorite. Road trip to Nevada, KU, a very heavy favorite. And, the Chiefs get the Jags. And that's not as much of a dominating line or anything like that as far as betting perspective. Let's start there in the NFL. We'll find out today, Tommy, if Travis Kelce is able to practice. So today's the first big day of the week on the heels of, hearing that Traveler may be a thing here. Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift apparently have been hanging out, which reminds me of when I was in middle and high school, and I would tell my dad, oh, we're just hanging out. I say that. That continued much later into life too. So what's the deal with her? We're just hanging out. We're just hanging out. I know what that means, Travis. I know how that goes. We may get Traveler. And I told you this yesterday, Tommy. It's maybe the best news ever for the Chiefs because Travis Kelce, if he can hook up with Taylor Swift, he can definitely take a team-friendly deal. He's not going to worry about that at all. It's sort of one of those Tom Brady Giselle things when you can, when you can date up or marry up and your significant other's more famous than you are. It's fantastic, right? That's great news for everybody.
Yeah, it was kind of weird when I heard about this because I know that Travis tried to get his phone number when she was in Kansas City and it didn't work out. That story was kind of funny when it came out a couple of months ago. But I didn't, for whatever reason, when I first heard about it, my first thought was, well, that's a mismatch. He's got to be quite a bit older than she is. They're exactly the same age. I didn't realize that. So they are exactly the same age. I get it. That's kind of a power couple move. I had not heard the phrase traveler until just now, and I love it. Did you make that up?
That's what I've been told. So the good news is you sent me this, and then I've got younger people around the office that were more in tune with the latest TikTok rumors and all of these things. That's where I've sort of heard the rumblings of Traveler. And I guess the internet sleuths have been all over this, just as far as tracking where they said they had been and what, people, I have no idea. I'll just follow along. I have no interest in actually, doing any research or figuring any of this stuff out, but it's fun. I love it. Look, Taylor Swift probably needs a new breakup album, right? I get it. And I don't think Travis Kelce has the personality where a bad breakup is going to impact him on the field. So let's roll with this thing, right? Let's make this happen.
Yeah, in the same week that we hear that Bill Belichick and his longtime girlfriend broke up, we also hear that now Travis Kelce is maybe linking up with Taylor Swift. When one bad relationship ends, another good one starts.
I don't know anything about Bill Belichick's personal life. I didn't even realize he was a bachelor. No clue. But that's interesting. It's look, these are things that matter. I was so excited. I snuck in that Travis Kelce nugget into the sportscast last night on KWCH. Right off the top there as, the most pressing Chiefs news. And my co-anchor, Rachel Hackbarth, is a huge Swiftie. And I just kept telling her, I was like, you're going to love sports today. And she doesn't know anything about sports. She's like, what are you talking about? I was like, don't read the script. Don't look ahead. You're going to love it. And she got so excited when I dropped that nugget. And I'm sure now has done all the appropriate research and will tell me all about it today. But, it's there. But, less importantly, maybe we got to figure out about Travis Kelce's knee. And today's the big day, right? I don't know if today's bigger than tomorrow. I suppose it is if he doesn't practice. But if he practices today, and it was a good point by Dan Israel yesterday, it'll really be about, does he practice 2 days in a row? Because if he does practice today, then, the ultimate question becomes, well, how's the swelling, right? Because that's what kept him out, I think, the last time. I don't think any of us think this is a long-term injury. I certainly don't. It just really becomes about how short-term is it, right? Because when we look at the Jaguars and look at the landscape of the AFC, I absolutely think that the Jaguars are going to be one of the teams you're contending with for that top seed because their division stinks and they're going to have an inherent advantage that way. Look at what we saw from the AFC West, for example. the Chargers. Yeah, they lost to the Dolphins, but I don't think anybody watched that game and thought, oh, the Chargers are going to be terrible this year. Like, they're not going to be a threat. No, you probably watch it and you're like, man, they're going to be able to score. The Raiders are certainly better than we thought. And the Broncos, with time, with healthy Jerry Jeudy, with like, I'm not throwing the Broncos aside, even though they lost to the Raiders, because I happen to think, like, I didn't quite understand, Tommy, with the Raiders hate, because they've got Jimmy Garoppolo there. And just remember a year ago how much we loved all the players they brought in, right? They got Josh Jacobs back. Jimmy Garoppolo's reunited with Josh McDaniels. Like, there's a decent chance that the Raiders are okay this year. And I never understood how, they were being put into the same conversation as like the Cardinals to be like maybe the worst team in football. I'm like, I know that didn't work out last year, but sometimes when we all really like something and it doesn't go right out of the gates, it's like, let's hang tight just a second. It's kind of the same thing with the Broncos. Like, we all liked all the additions the Broncos made. It just was a bad fit with the coach. Well, now, they got a coach there that, in Sean Payton, that you think will at least make it better. My point of all of that is the AFC West is much better than the AFC South. Much better.
Yeah, I think that when you're talking about the Raiders, I mean, you can't forget, obviously, Devontae Adams is there, and he's still a top-tier wide receiver in the NFL. They've got Max Crosby, who I personally believe is at the same level as a Nick Bosa or a TJ Watt. Like, he's right there. And if he's not right there,
I think he's right under him.
Them.
But he's got the right attitude.
As far as one of the top defensive players in the NFL, I think that their deficiency has been their coach. Josh McDaniels hasn't shown that he can be a top level coach in the NFL as of right now. Will he take a step forward this year? I mean, time will tell. They're 1-0. And then with the Broncos, I think that obviously the big question is, will the marriage between Sean Payton and Russell Wilson work out? And I think it's going to take some time. He was missing Jerry Jeudy for sure. I'm not sure, they scored 16 points against the Raiders in a loss in week 1. I'm not sure that even at the peak of this offense for Denver, we're going to see them scoring 28 points a game. I mean, I think we're looking somewhere more around 20, 21, 22 on average, somewhere around there when they finally hit their stride. So, I mean, I agree with you. Overall, though, the AFC West is a more difficult division than the AFC South is. I mean, it is, in my mind, the Jaguars' division to lose. And we saw Trevor Lawrence take a massive step forward last year with Doug Peterson, adding back in Calvin Ridley, who is a beast, plus Zay Jones, who had a great touchdown catch on Sunday. And oh, by the way, Travis Etienne is one of the better running backs in the NFL as well. I mean, they've got explosive firepower offensively. The big question, I think, for the Jags is going to be, what's their defense going to look like? They gave up a handful of touchdowns to Anthony Richardson and the Colts on Sunday. And that's where you really want to have Travis Kelce back if you're Kansas City, because this Jags defense through 1 week has shown that they will give up touchdowns.
If Kelce's going like at close to full strength, I'm going to come up with some combination of like a parlay bet for Kelce to have a big game, right? Like whether it's, a couple of touchdowns and 80 yards, whatever it is. Like I do think that Kelce could be big in that game and will need to be big in that game. And probably most interesting to me, Tommy, is, what we see from the Chiefs defense. Congratulations to Steve for winning the Win Surge tickets. Let's come back and let's talk about that side of the ball for Kansas City as we look ahead to the Jags game this weekend, because I honestly think that's the bigger test long term for things that we'll see that will matter to this season. I'll explain what I mean there. 869-1240 is the number to call. Lots of stuff to give away today, so keep that IHOP hotline locked in to try and win some of those prizes. Tommy and I will be back, more Chiefs talk as we look ahead to the Jags on Sports Daily.
Time to get busy.
This is Sports Daily on KFH.
All right, welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily here on KFH. Jake Albracht, Tommy Castor alongside you. Glad to be here with you. Tommy, we're talking Chiefs, Jags. We're looking ahead, previewing things a little bit here. I think offensively, the question becomes about Travis Kelce, of course, and can the receivers bounce back from, what we saw in week one? That's a clear question, I think, for the season. But I think, to me, like, the bigger thing that I want to see, because I just now, like, my expectations for the offense have shifted just a little bit because we don't know what's happening with Kelce, and we know that, these receivers have clear work to do. I'm more at peace with saying the offense is going to take a little time and be good. It's the defense that I want to see with a test like this. Like, is this defense, which really, stood out last week, and now we'll get Chris Jones back, who I think he'll play this weekend. We'll find that out probably today. Is this defense good enough to be like top half, top third of the league good, because that does change things a little bit and take some of the pressure off the offense. That's what I want to see this weekend. They're going to get tested. I mean, just watching Red Zone and flipping around a little bit last week, you see a lot of the Jags. Calvin Ridley looks like a problem right now for opposing defenses. They've got two. You mentioned Etienne. They also drafted Tank Bigsby. So they've got two running backs now to contend with. Christian Kirk, who didn't do much in the last game, is still there, who was fantastic last year. They've got Evan Ingram there, who has been really good since he's been there. Like, they are loaded offensively. And while I think that the Lions offense is good and respectable for what it does also, it was far more hobbled and, like, they don't have all their firepower right now. The Jags do. And we're going to see that defense of Kansas City tested big time this weekend. And I really want to see how they hold up to that, because I think that, Tommy, will be the big thing. Like, as we look big picture at the Chiefs and we think about how good they might be, that's going to be the thing that really makes the difference. I don't care what the offense does this week. I don't care what they did last week. As this season goes on, the Chiefs are going to score a ton of points. Like, I'm not overly concerned about that. I don't know how it's going to happen yet, but in whatever way it needs to happen, it eventually will happen. And it could happen this week. Who knows? But the defense is the thing to me that becomes this bigger storyline early in the season, because if it is that good, Tommy, I do think that will surprise us. I mean, Spags defenses have been decent, but they're usually decent by the end of the year. Coming out of the gates hot is sort of a different thing here.
Yeah, if they back up their performance last week with another solid performance this week, and you presumably add back in Chris Jones, then we might be looking at a really solid defensive unit across the NFL in Kansas City. Now, the difference is going to be, and you mentioned this, the Detroit offense versus the Jacksonville offense. So the Detroit offense, you've got Jared Goff, Jared Goff has had kind of a resurgence in Detroit for sure. You've got a rookie running back in Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. I think they will be a solid running football team. I don't think they're quite there yet. And, right out of the gate, you saw promise from Jahmyr Gibbs, but really David Montgomery carried the load running the football for the Lions. And then really it's Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, that's basically it. I mean, they've got, Josh Reynolds, but really it's Amon-Ra St. Brown. There are so many more weapons that Jacksonville has. And you've got a quarterback in Trevor Lawrence that I think is head and shoulders above Jared Goff right now. So you've got Trevor Lawrence throwing the football to a Calvin Ridley, who not only is a problem, but he's a motivated problem, right? Like, didn't play at all last year. I think wants to make up for lost time. He looked incredible against the Colts last week. So you've got him, and then the other weapons, the other wide receivers in Zay Jones and Christian Kirk, plus the running backs you mentioned. The Kansas City defense, they're going to have their hands full this weekend, but they put out a really good effort last week. If they can duplicate that with the addition of Chris Jones back there in the middle, man, we might be looking at, a really, really great defensive unit. So I'm with you. That's the matchup that I want to look at the closest this weekend, is the Jacksonville offense with their weapons taking on what could be a pretty solid defense for Kansas City.
I'll tell you that I actually do like the matchup for Kansas City. It's why I went ahead and, jumped on them early in the week this week, because I wasn't sure. Like, look, the line right now is 3. If Travis Kelce gets a clean bill of health and is like good to go, and Chris Jones plays, that line's going to move off of 3. It'll go up. I actually like this matchup for the Chiefs, and I like the Chiefs in this game because I think regardless of what, if the linebackers can keep it up, right, and if the pass rush and Karlaftis plus Jones, and we'll see about Felix Anudike-Uzomah and all those things, I think, by the end of the year, this could be a really solid pass rush too. But the strength of the Chiefs right now is their secondary. And so that helps, right? When you look at what the Jaguars are going to do, that helps certainly. So I think it's an advantageous matchup. I just think this is a really good opportunity, as much as anything, for the Chiefs. But make no mistake about it, this is a tremendous opportunity for Jacksonville too, Tommy. Like, this is the game of the week to me, because I think both of these teams really are looking to prove something. Like, if you look at the rest of the slate and everything, I think this is the headline game this week. because you've got the old guard, the Kansas City Chiefs, who, got a little blood on their lip, right? What don't make me taste my own blood. Like, what are they going to do? How are they going to respond to last week? We know how, Patrick Mahomes will respond, but we don't know how Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore and some of these we don't know how they're going to respond. We haven't seen it before. So there is that unknown, and the Chiefs must feel this to some degree. It helps that, the other top end AFC teams lost too. But when you're the top dog and somebody comes at you like that, you're going to feel that. And you're definitely going to feel it when it's the Jags and what they did last year and what they appear to have done in the offseason to move them forward. And if you're Jacksonville, it doesn't get any bigger of an opportunity. You get the Chiefs at home. I really think this is a chance for Jacksonville, and you don't want to get too hyperbolic when you're trying to evaluate the NFL, because it's the NFL and we've learned our lesson on that time and time again. But there to me, Tommy, seems to be a very real possibility that when we're in late November and December, we've got a situation where the Chiefs and Jags are right there, both contending for one of those top spots, or even if it's contending for home games or whatever, this tiebreaker could come into effect, right? Like, don't you see a scenario where both of these teams could win 13 games this year, right? Like, there could absolutely be a factor where the outcome of this game directly impacts, and I don't just mean, that's an obvious statement, but I mean like tiebreaker, or maybe they're separated by a game. Like, it could be that razor thin to where we're looking back at this one as like, oh, that was a missed opportunity for one of these two teams.
Well, and that's what makes the stakes for this particular game bigger than, the Chiefs going 0-1 against the Lions, because you're playing out of conference. Now you're playing in conference where, seeding and standings are going to matter come late in the year. I don't think it's hyperbole, honestly, and maybe you do, but I don't think it's hyperbole.
I just mean,
to say,
it's not that it's hyperbole. It's that in the NFL, when we want to say that, something catastrophic will happen to a team or whatever, and it doesn't end up because this league is so week to week, but it's as big as it could be in week 2.
Yeah. And I don't think it also is hyperbole to say that this is a must win for Kansas City, because it is a conference game. You cannot fall to 0-2 to start the season in that division, and as you're going to be battling for seeding. I mean, think about the stakes of, the Chiefs. I mean, we know this because we followed it for so long. The AFC championship runs through Kansas City, right? You go 0-2 to start the season, it makes it that much more difficult to get to that point and have a home AFC championship game. And I know that that's way down the line, and I know that there are a lot of other things that need to happen before then. But man, when you're competing not only in your division, but competing against the Bills and the Bengals, and of course the Jaguars now, and these other teams in the conference, man, you cannot afford to fall to 0-2 to start the season against a Jags team that could move to 2-0. And then all of a sudden they're looking at, really, really early on in the year, the number 1 seed. I mean, of course, anything can happen as we move forward in the season, but I don't think if you're Kansas City, you can afford to go to 0-2.
Well, look, the Chiefs lost 2 games in the first 5, I think it was last year. In
but they didn't start 0-2.
What's that?
They didn't.
No, I know, but so hang with me. In 2021, didn't they lose? Yeah, they lost to the Ravens and then the Bills. So they lost 2 of their first 5 in 2021, and then they lost to the Titans. Remember, and everybody was panicking. And look, the thing about the Chiefs is, and this is what I mean. Yes, I think the Chiefs can go 0-2 because I think they're good enough to win their next 15 games if they do. I don't think there's not like I'd be far more concerned right now if I was a Bills fan than if I was a Chiefs fan. The Bills just lost to the Jets without Aaron Rodgers, and the Bills are totally healthy and should be ready to roll, right? The Chiefs, in week 1, were missing 2 of their 3 best players. And in week 2, may not have either of those guys at full strength either. Like, if they were to lose in Jacksonville, again, like, that's not going to be the thing for me where next week I'm like, look, it's panic time for the Chiefs, because I don't think it is. I think they can still win 15 games in a row. And but there aren't very many teams like that. I just think they've shown us that, right? Every time we're ready to overreact just a little bit to them, they correct things and sort of make their way back to their own law of averages, which is to win like 14 plus games or 13 plus games or whatever it is. And so, yeah, if they started 0-2, it wouldn't be great, but the Chargers also lost last week, and we're not really scared of the Broncos or the Raiders to win the division. So you'd be maybe at most a game behind the Chargers?
True, but if you go 0-2, the margin to then go and win 14 plus games is
to get the one overall
thin.
seed. Yes.
It's razor thin at that point. And of course, we've seen Kansas City do well in the playoffs, regardless if they're the number 1 seed. So I'm just talking about trying to have that path to a home AFC championship game again at the end of the season. It makes it that much more difficult if you start the season 0-2. And by the way, 0-2 against, an opponent in the Lions that I know people are high on, but that should have been a win. Jacksonville, they're on the rise for sure. But then after that, you've got the Bears at home. That should be a win. The Jets on the road without Aaron Rodgers, that should be a win. The Vikings on the road, I don't know. See what happens there with the Vikings, and then the Broncos at home. And then at that point, the schedule gets really difficult. That's been the narrative for a long time, is how easy, quote unquote, the first 6 games have been, comparatively to the last part of the season. So you've got to take advantage of that, when it's there. And that's why I say, as close to a must win as I think it can be this weekend in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I don't think there's a must win in the NFL in week 2, but this is by far the most important game of the week, most impactful game of the week. And the thing is too, like, in the other reason we won't need to overreact to anything is, if Jacksonville wins, you're still then, like, Jacksonville still has something to prove too. Like, they still have to be able to make it through a whole season and try to go get 14 wins also. Yeah. We don't know if they can do that. We know that the Chiefs can do it. So I think, and it brings me back to what I started to think about yesterday, probably, as I really started to think about this game. This is a massive game for Jacksonville. It feels big for the Chiefs, but again, the Chiefs aren't at full strength right now. They're not at full strength, literally, right? With Kelsey and Jones maybe playing, we don't know yet. They're also not, like, philosophically at full strength, because we know now that, there's work to be done with this group of receivers over the course of this season. The Jags are at full strength. The Jags are the up and comer. They could prove so much here. The game is at home for them. This to me feels like just an enormous game for Jacksonville. And here's the interesting thing. It felt that way last week for the Lions too. So, like, you've got a very similar situation to what we saw with the Lions last week, and that the Lions are coming into Arrowhead. They get the stage. They're trying to prove to everybody that the end of last season was no fluke, and they're for real. And guess what? They kind of did, Tommy. Like, that's what they did. And so everyone's like, okay, Lions, like, all right. The Jags have the exact same sort of opportunity, but it's amplified a little bit, because as much as we think the Lions, maybe they could win the division, or the Lions aren't going to be like the 1 seed in the NFC. I don't think anybody's saying that. Maybe they will be. Who knows? But I think the Jags are the expectation for them is just a little bit higher. And, they're on, they're on the cheaper end of Trevor Lawrence's deal. There is a sense of urgency, I think, for Jacksonville to take advantage of this now, because you've got the ability to sort of load up this talent.
Fairly easy division, by the way, also. Absolutely. That you're playing in.
And you have a chance to go beat the champs. Now, I'm sure Jacksonville would have preferred if Kansas City didn't struggle at all in week 1, and because they're mad and all those things. I wouldn't like that, because I don't like a motivated Patrick Mahomes, but like, he's got that Tom Brady factor, right? It's like, great. Thanks a lot, Lions. We pissed off Patrick Mahomes here. But Patrick Mahomes can't catch his own passes. Look, if I do though, again, back to, I like this matchup for the Chiefs. If Kelsey can go, and probably Kelsey and Chris Jones. Look, Chris Jones should go. I don't know why they wouldn't play Chris Jones, but Kelsey's the big question. But I like it. I like the matchup for Kansas City.
And my big question really is more Chris Jones than it is Travis Kelce. We know if Travis Kelce is even remotely healthy, he's going to go and he's going to make an impact. I wonder with Chris Jones. I think back to when was it, about a week ago, that he did that charity event while the holdout was still going on. And I think somebody asked him, like, if you signed a deal, when could you play? And he's like, I can go suit up and play, tomorrow. So now that that holdout is done and there's that 1-year deal that's inked and all of that, and he's active and it looks like he's going to be ready to go, at least physically, I wonder how willing Steve Spagnuolo is going to be in working him in. Like, is it something where he's such a great talent that you just put him in right away, 100%, like full go? Or do you work him back in? I mean, remember, he wasn't at OTAs, wasn't at training camp, wasn't in preseason, wasn't in week 1. So at what kind of hesitation, if any, will there be from the defensive coaches in working Chris Jones in, or will he be full steam ahead? That's really what I'm really interested in looking at for Sunday.
I think they can find that out at practice. So, like, schematically, I don't think you have anything to worry about, right? Like, he doesn't need to learn the system. He doesn't need to do any of that. He'll be fine. It's really is his conditioning where it needs to be. Chris Jones says it is. I think he's probably right, and I think that they can probably find that out pretty quick the first day he comes back to practice. All right, you say you're right. We'll start running. Like, here we go. Let's see. The responsible thing is probably to ease it back, but you got to have a conversation with Chris Jones too. If Chris Jones says he can go, and you're pretty aware that, like, all the risk is on Chris Jones's plate, I think you can have an honest conversation. He just signed all this incentive stuff. Like, Chris, you think you're ready? Like, he's going to be motivated to get out there quickly, but he also needs to be careful and not tweak anything or do anything like that. And I don't doubt that he's been working his tail off. Like, he's not of the physical stature of like Warren Sapp at that position. Like, he looks like a pro wrestler out there. He's a monster. He's not, I don't want to use the term fat because that's not very nice, but there's some guys that play that position that's a part of their game. He's not that. So I think he'll be fine. I think he'll be motivated to go. And honestly, after seeing the deal that he signed, whatever like emotional impact for the coaches that this clearly had, right? It very obviously did. I think they're going to be sympathetic now because Chris Jones just got hosed. And like, nobody likes to see that. Like, even if we all saw it coming and we've been right about it for a long time and everything else, like, it still kind of sucks for him. And I think his coaches will have some sympathy to that. And I'm sure that Chris Jones, I would love to be a fly on the room of like the conversation between Andy Reid and Chris Jones. Like, man, we're all kind of sorry that happened that way. That was no fun for anybody. Let's get out there, remember the good old days, and let's go win some football games. So I think as long as his conditioning is up, he'll be fine to play full go, but they'll be able to find that out in practice. I mean, I think that they will. I think they can do tests and things like that and be like, yeah, he's good to go, or he's not. Let's ease him in. Either way, he's going to have an impact on the game. I don't think there's any question about that. All right, 869-1240. Chiefs fans, chime in. What do you think about the matchup this weekend? Call us on the IHOP hotline, brought to you by IHOP, where guests can enjoy 4 new sweet and savory biscuit options. We've got some movie tickets here, a special screening of the animated feature Paw Patrol, the Mighty Movie. You can get a sneak peek Thursday, September 28th, 7 o'clock, Boulevard Theater in Town West. Take the family. Keep them up late that night. You can get a pair of tickets on us here at Sports Daily and KFH. Send caller, IHOP hotline 869-1240. Jad will get us a winner. We'll come back, wrap up hour number 1. Kevin Saul, Wichita State Athletic Director, coming at the top of the next hour. Sports Daily rolls ahead just after this. All right, welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily. Jana wins some tickets to see Paw Patrol at Boulevard Theaters. Good call, Jana. Enjoy it. We're Paw Patrol family here, Tommy. Oddly enough, my son has not been quite as into it as his sisters were. I think it's because our TV provider has changed, and so it's just not like the first thing we see on TV. He loves it though. He does love Paw Patrol, and he has all the hand-me-down Paw Patrol toys. So we'll definitely be seeing that one in some capacity. So, Tommy, we've got giveaways still to come here in the second hour. We'll give away some HTO in the second hour. We also have Wichita State Athletic Director Kevin Saul coming up at the top of the hour. Interested to catch up with him on volleyball, but really to see how things are going with the two basketball programs and learn more about this, bowling announcement and what that means big picture for the school. Just ask some questions about that. Those watching on the video stream, my son apparently has crawled into the room here and just saw his head pop up, and now he bailed. He's out. It is a great time of year. It's the fall. We'll also talk a little more about KU's matchup. Begin to look ahead a little bit. KU, K-State. In the next hour, too. We could put a bow on the Chiefs here, Tommy. 3 points now. Mentioned this, that's going up if Travis Kelce plays. I would think at least a half point to a point and a half. I think it's going to go, upward. But I don't know what to expect out of Kelce. I mean, it's been a long time. They played on a Thursday. He was still banged up. They're not rushing him back. We finally are going to get an idea today of how things are going. Can he practice? That's the first question. Can he practice 2 days in a row and keep the swelling down? Is this a big deal, or is this not a big deal at all? I think that's the big part of it. I think there's a chance, Tommy, that we don't hear anything else about this. I guess he put up his podcast. I'm just seeing this right now. He said that he feels much better than he did a week ago, and he feels like an a-hole for not being able to be out there with his team. So, he's giving an update on his podcast that dropped. So during the break and switch into hour number 2, we'll sort of look at that and see if there's any good information as I'm trying to read the subtitles as we go here. He clearly feels better, and just is saying He's now making fun of his brother for telling everybody that he was going to play last week when he's like, my knee kind of hurt pretty bad. He's giving his brother a hard time. That'll be good stuff to see that. And I want to see, is his brother going to give him a hard time about Taylor Swift? That's the big question.
Yeah, that's really what I care about in this podcast is, the conversation about that. But, as of right now, back to the game as of right now on Wednesday, I don't feel confident in the spread whatsoever. And I don't know if I will, honestly. I mean, for all the reasons that we talked about earlier in this hour. I mean, you've got a motivated Patrick Mahomes. That over the last, 10 days from the time that they played the Lions to the time they played the Jags, they've worked significantly on trying to figure out what's going on in that wide receiver room. So I would think offensively, the Chiefs are going to be better than they were against the Lions for sure. But then all the things we talked about with the explosive weapons that the Jags have and how motivated they are to make a statement with the champs in town. I don't know if I'm going to touch that spread. I mean, I want to find out what's happening with Travis Kelce, how, involved he's going to be potentially in the game. I think right now, the only thing I'm interested in as far as betting is concerned is the over-under. I think it's going to be over just because of the dynamic weapons that Jacksonville has and knowing the amount of work that probably Kansas City has put in to improving their offense from last week. So really, that's about the only thing that, as of right now, I'm confident in betting is the over-under on the side of the over. But as far as the spread, I'm staying away right now.
Yeah, we're opposite on that. I'm not feeling good about the over or the under, but if the Chiefs defense is for real, I'm not going to like many of their overs early in the year here. Just because I don't, if their defense is for real, even if their offense is good, some of their overs early on will be hard to hit. The Chiefs, they've been sort of that way in a lot of years. I'll tell you, it almost never works out for me to take the early lines on these things. Almost never, Tommy. I'll tell you one it did take, because I took the Chiefs. I took the Cowboys against the Jets. Just be on, but this is pre-Rodgers. I got it at 3 points. And I did it because it was like, man, that pass rush against that Jets offensive line, that's a good matchup. I'm going to just go ahead and jump on that. Well, that line's now at 9.5, of course, so I've got the Cowboys at 3 points. So that finally I get one. We'll see if that happens with the Chiefs, of course, when we see Travis Kelce's injury update later today, actually. I'll let Tommy look at his new heights and do a little, internet sleuthing on if there's anything that came out of that. I'm sure all the beat reporters will be watching that as quickly as they can to try and get any information, of course, on Taylor Swift news, too. We'll come back. Kevin Saul, Wichita State Athletic Director, going to join us a little bit. We'll talk about everything Shockers when we return on Sports Daily.
Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
Hey, Shocker fans, want the latest on Wichita State athletics? Let's go right to the source with Shocker AD Kevin Saul.
All right, welcome back in, everybody, to another hour of Sports Daily. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor with you here. Jad Chambers producing, manning that IHOP hotline, which is occupied right now by Wichita State Athletic Director Kevin Saul. Joins us for a bi-weekly visit here on Sports Daily. Always appreciate the time. Kevin, how are you enjoying this fall morning weather?
Jacob, Tommy, we're doing awesome. Hope you guys are doing well. It's awesome to feel the weather turn a little bit. I know we'll be in the 80s here the next 7 to 10 days, but fall is definitely here. It's upon us.
So we get a big announcement late last week, and if people missed it kind of in the mix of a high school football day and some of that, you guys are adding collegiately, sort of officially, women's bowling at Wichita State. Now, we know there's a rich history of bowling with Wichita State as sort of an unofficial thing. Walk us through what's happening, why it's happening, and what this means for the bowlers there at Wichita State.
Sure, I'd be glad to. So the best way I know how to describe it, Jacob and Tommy, is that our women's bowling program and our men's bowling program have operated as we'll call it a varsity club sport that has been funded and operated out of student affairs in the Radigan Student Center. Well, the history and context is that in 1994, the NCAA adopted bowling as an emerging NCAA championship sport. And in 2004, it became a full-fledged NCAA championship sport. It's one of the 90 sports that the NCAAs operate a championship within. There are 101 programs throughout the country that compete in the NCAA championship version of women's bowling. Again, the NCAA does not offer men's bowling. Our program has been in existence since the early 60s. It has won 10 intercollegiate team championships, particularly in the years mostly before and maybe some after the NCAAs made the change in 2004. It's had 5 singles championships in its history. You mentioned rich history, 136 scholar athletes, 65 All-Americans, 9 MVP or Players of the Year. We've had individuals that have gone on and either been multiple-time All-Americans or competing for their country on an international stage or have won professional events. So it does have a long and rich history and tradition. I think the why, there's really a handful of reasons. Number one, because of the rich history and tradition, we feel like we can be competitive and successful early on in the transition. And again, it will start as an NCAA championship sport July 1 of 24. The facilities are first class. At the bottom floor of Radigan Student Center has 8 lanes. There's a grill and bar down there. There's offices, there's team spaces. So it's a really nice facility to be able to practice and compete in. It certainly helps us evolve and adapt to an ever-widening gender distribution in the general student body. You guys may recall that we are obligated as an athletics program to be within 1% or 2% of the general student population gender distribution. So it allows us to do that in our roster management planning. But I think most importantly, it allows us to honor some coaches and literally 200 or 300 bowling student athletes and alumni that have done some really great things over the last 4 decades and have all pulled hard for this moment. So there's a lot of joy, excitement, and happiness in that announcement last week. It also gives us guys an opportunity to score postseason Directors Cup points, which contributes to our department's goal of being a top 100 program. So a lot of reasons to do it, and we're just excited. I know the young women in our program are very excited as well.
Kevin, you mentioned coaches. So Holly Harris continues as the women's bowling coach at Wichita State. She's an alum, a Shocker alum, an All-American. Formerly, when she played for Wichita State, she led the women's bowling team to a national championship in 2021. Now will lead this program into the transition into Division I championship athletics. What kind of transition is that like for her as the head coach of that program?
Well, there's a lot of elements involved in the transition. Tommy, I would tell you we started this conversation late last summer, but I would also tell you in the last decade, this has been a subject that has been visited by this administration on multiple occasions. And so there's a lot of research that has taken place in terms of what it's going to take to align championship level resources to expectations, but there's also all the support network that you talked about. And so as we walk through the finances, what it's going to take for us to be competitive from a salary and benefit perspective with a head coach in Holly Harris and then an assistant coach in Mark Lewis, the recruiting needs, equipment, gear, facility rental, travel, nutrition, all those components. But there's a really important integration into athletics and all the support networks that take place there, like academic support and compliance, performance and mental health, strength and conditioning, sports medicine. That will take us a little time. Obviously, we didn't want to rush that. We'll take some time to fully integrate into the department. The young women that are currently in the program will go through, for those that haven't, the initial and continuing eligibility process through the NCAA clearinghouse. So that will take some time as well. And so we've laid out about 10 months worth of runway for us between now and July 1st of 24 to make that happen. Obviously, Holly will be in a steep learning curve and has been over the last 4 to 6 weeks in terms of NCAA compliance, annual recruiting calendars, contact evaluation periods, all those things that we're held accountable to. So we've been working hard at it. We've got a good group of staff that's working on the transition. Kent Hagenauer, our senior associate AD and chief financial officer, will be the day-to-day administrator for bowling. And he's done a nice job orchestrating some of this transition. We'll continue to do so over the next 10 months.
So Kevin Saul, Wichita State Athletic Director, joining us. I'll just say, forgive my ignorance on this because I haven't, seen this before. So bowling is it at the NCAA level? Is it only a women's sport? I'm not seeing anything for men's bowling, which also has a rich history, of course, at Wichita State. Is it women only at this point?
It is. Yes. It's a women's only program sponsored championship through the NCAA.
So as we look at it, and there's a couple of things that I thought about when I saw this, and that answers one of the questions: why not the men who are also good? So, at some point, I guess we can explore that if it ever becomes a men's sport. I don't know if there's any insight to that. And then the other thing is with Title IX, and I don't understand this fully either. Does this do anything to the thoughts on women's soccer at Wichita State? Does it change any of the goals and anything there, or is it still full steam ahead there? And this was just like a totally separate opportunity to do something here?
Oh, no, it does not shut the door on our women's soccer thoughts and conversations, particularly as we're in the middle of renovating Cessna Stadium. That is certainly within our thoughts and goals. I'll share this with you just from a context standpoint. Obviously, the Office of Civil Rights, Title IX, gender equity, really important components to secondary and higher education throughout the country, and particularly those entities that receive federal funding. And one of the elements is that we have to maintain a 1% to 2% variance for the gender distribution on campus. And so I'll give you an example. Like when I was a student 25 years ago, it was pretty close to 50-50 males and females. And the national average now is approaching 56-44 in favor of females. And so what you're seeing is athletics programs throughout the country are having to adapt to that. And you can do that only so far can you do that through roster management before the numbers start to get a little bit unattainable. And so adding programs responsibly and methodically is an important part of meeting that element. As I mentioned before, guys, there's about 5 other reasons why you do this. This is just one of them. And so that gives us an opportunity to do that. That roster size on a typical team is usually between 8 and 12. as we transition from the club varsity program into NCAA championship program, it may be a little larger as we work our way towards the 10 or 12, because what we don't want to do is hurt any young women that are currently in the program or currently at Wichita State. And so we'll walk through that in the right way. So you're adding 10 to 12. When it comes time for a soccer, a handful of years from now, you're going to be adding 22 to 25. And so that obviously changes the dynamic a little bit. It's reasonable to assume that 5 years from now, the gender distribution will continue to widen. At least that's the trend that we're seeing between males and females on a college campus. And so these are just things we got to keep an eye on so that we make sure that we maintain compliance.
Kevin, taking a look at women's volleyball at Wichita State, had a rough weekend against Colorado inside Charles Koch Arena, but now on the way to Greeley, Colorado for the Northern Colorado Classic. It's the final non-conference part of the action, part of the schedule for the volleyball squad. So what are you seeing right now from women's volleyball?
Yeah, it's really interesting because we talked a little bit last year about non-conference being up and down. And I think you could use the same words to describe that this year, that we've been a little up and down. What we're battling this year more than we were last year is some injuries. We've got 3 all-league players returning to this team, and we've battled injuries with 2 significant impact players. So if you're looking at the lineups, you can see how that's varied a little bit. We've had some women playing out of position. And those elements. But again, there's no excuses. Everybody deals with those elements. I think you can talk about that first weekend where we lost in 5 to a solid Notre Dame team. We lost in 4 to the host Texas Tech. Again, good competition. I think we played competitive matches. The Notre Dame game, I think, was 15-13 in the 5th, if I recall correctly, beat Houston Christian. Then we go to Champaign, and we get our first road Big Ten win in program history. That's a significant accomplishment, and sweep Illinois State and feel really good coming out of that weekend. And then we play a ranked Kansas team last Thursday. We had the largest crowd for volleyball since 2018 here. It was a yellow out. It was our 15-1 match where all our student athletes came in.
On a Chiefs night too, Kevin. That's awesome.
Yeah, really nice crowd. Really nice crowd. And so that first set, I may be 1 or 2 off, but I think we had 6 or 8 service or passing errors and lost that first set 25-22, if I recall correctly. That changes the dynamic of the match. Our first sets in our 7 matches, I think, were 2 and 5 in first set. So obviously we got to figure out a way to start a little faster. But the Kansas match, very competitive, and we pushed them in set 4 to almost take it to a 5th set. And then I think we kind of lost our way a little bit in Colorado. We got swept in 3 in the second set, if I recall correctly. We gave up a 17-3 run. So obviously, you're not going to be perfect all the way through. And we had an up and down non-conference last year and finished well in the league. We're preseason picked 3rd in the league this year, and I expect us to be very competitive. SMU and Rice will be front runners as well. And so we'll continue to get healthy and get better. And this weekend they're in Greeley, Colorado. We've got on Thursday, tomorrow, they've got Bradley, and then Friday is Omaha, University of Nebraska Omaha, which is a team that we lost to last year. So I know that they'll be looking forward to that match. And then we play the host Northern Colorado on Saturday. So then at that point in time, we're into league play. Next Wednesday and Saturday we're at East Carolina and then Charlotte. So we get deep into league play at that point in time.
Looking forward to AAC volleyball to see where the Shockers sit and hopefully can get into the NCAA tournament. Kevin Saul, Wichita State Athletic Director, joining us. We're right on the ledge of basketball season, which is crazy to even think about. We've had students on campus. You've had the teams on campus now for both the men and women. I think programs people are excited about, but programs we don't know a lot about with the new directions. What are you hearing or seeing, if you've seen any of it, from the teams and in the way those groups are coming together?
Yeah, watching both basketball programs in their day-to-day walk, whether it's sitting in on a film session, watching a practice, the attention to detail and the urgency and the teaching that's going on is different, not disparagingly at all. It's just different than what we've had. here over the last year. And so that piece is really good. I think the culture is great, but culture is really tested through adversity, and we haven't had a lot of that yet. I think Coach Nooner and Coach Mills have put together a really good staff. They recruit well. I've had an opportunity to spend time around families and prospective student athletes over the last several weekends. They do an unbelievable job there, and I am excited about where we're headed from a recruiting standpoint. Obviously, you guys know it's impermissible for us to talk details there until we get to signing day and after. But very excited about where we're headed in both programs there. So a lot to be excited about. We have a special weekend planned October 6th, 7, and 8. It is homecoming. They're calling it Shocktoberfest here on campus, and we tend to bounce that around a little bit over the last decade or so, but we're committed to that being a fall event. We've got volleyball on Friday night the 6th. We will have softball and baseball playing fall games, fall contests on Saturday the 7th early afternoon. We're going to host a full athletic department, student athlete, and prospective student athlete tailgate out in the parking lot. We'll do Shocker Madness that night for men's and women's basketball. We've got a unique twist on that, where we'll involve all of our programs. And then we've got a concert that we're working on that night as well. So it's going to be a packed weekend. It'll be a great opportunity for Shocker Nation and folks in Wichita to come down and learn about our team and meet them on the night of the 6th and enjoy a good concert. So a lot more information to come out on that in the next few days and the weeks ahead, but we're excited about it.
Kevin, I won't ask you about anybody specifically, as I know you can't talk about it, but generally speaking, from a philosophical point of view with women's basketball, how important is it? And I know it's kind of, it can be the same for both men's and women's, but specifically women's basketball and what Terry Nooner is building. How important in your mind is it? You mentioned the recruiting, but looking at the talent that we have here locally in the Wichita area.
Yeah, I think, Tommy, Jacob, all three of us would be in agreement that's an important element, right? If you can, every coach takes a new opportunity and says, man, we got to keep the best local talent at home. And so I think that's really important for a lot of reasons, because it builds that community pride. There's an engagement with the community there to come and support young people that in high school would be well known or supported in the community. That piece is important. I know the staff has done a really nice job with young women that have been in the Missouri Phenom AAU program that Terry, Nick, and Antoine have all been a part of over the last 20 years. Obviously, Antoine's success in high school, winning 4 state championships and going to another 2 finals in his 6th year. He's flipped 2 JUCO programs. So he's got a tremendous network within the state and particularly within the city. You're seeing some of that bear fruit through the portal, where we've got some young women that were from Wichita and competed in high school in Wichita, went to other schools, and they're coming back. So that piece is really important. It's not the most important. Obviously, there's got talent and culture, and all the intangibles have to be there as well. But it's always great to be able to support local talent and draw on that inherent interest of folks that have a history in Wichita.
Yeah, I think that last part's one of the most interesting. Girls basketball at the high school level here over the last 5 or 6 years has been incredible. We have seen some girls that have gone on to do some unbelievable things at schools around the area. But I went to a D2 school, Kevin, where, they were, competing for national championships, but man, they recruited locally from small towns, and they would outdraw the men because people wanted to see the local talent. I think that last part of what you said, I think it does help from an interest level at the same time as, the talent's good around here too, but that helps, right?
No, it absolutely does. And you just reminded me of one of the most important lessons I learned as a young staff member when I was working at K-State. We had, Coach Ded Patterson was the coach there, and she took a team to the Sweet 16 that had Kendra Wecker, Nicole Oldie, and Lori Kane that were all from very local towns, Clay Center, Smith Center, in and around, and I think Council Grove, in and around Manhattan. And the impact there was tremendous. As they had success, those towns would empty out and come to Manhattan. In fact, back in those days, guys, they used to play the men's and women's basketball games in the Big 12 were double headers on Sundays. And the crowd for women's basketball was averaging somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000, and the men's basketball there was not. And so they actually flipped from the standard of playing women's first at K-State and men's second to actually playing the men's game first and the women's game second, so the men could have a solid second half crowd as they were building up for the women. So I think those lessons that if you're paying attention and you watch, winning with local talent can have a real impact to your program.
All right, Kevin. Well, you brought up Shocktoberfest. People, I assume, GoShockers.com, get all the information they need on that and get ready and set up for it. Is that available for people yet?
Yeah, absolutely. If you just Google Shocktoberfest 2, you'll get a university site that's got a full schedule as well. The most important piece to remember is it's October 6th, 7th, and 8th. We got volleyball Friday night the 6th. We've got basically everything that we can possibly have going active on Saturday. We do. We've got baseball, softball. We've got Shocker Madness, men's and women's basketball introductory event, a concert that night, volleyball again on Sunday. So it'll be a fun weekend for us. All
right, Kevin Saul, Wichita State Athletic Director. We'll chat again in a couple of weeks. We'll be right on the eve of that. Kevin, we appreciate it. Enjoy the fall. Enjoy some football.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, guys. Take care and go Shockers.
There goes Kevin Saul. We'll come back. If you missed any of that, if you're joining us late, you can always go back and listen at kfhradio.com for free on the Odyssey app. Jad cuts those out. It'll be there by itself. Shocker fans, a lot of interesting stuff, a lot of new things happening. The bowling stuff is interesting. I think some of the questions about navigating what it means for other programs on campus. I know a lot of people have been curious about that. Kevin addresses all of it, so you can go back and listen. All right, let's come back, Tommy, and let's begin to look at the college football weekend. We'll take our bird's eye looks at the K-State and KU games this weekend as we roll forward on a Wednesday edition of Sports Daily. All right. Welcome back, Kevin Saul. We appreciate it. Bi-weekly visit. A lot of good stuff there happening at Wichita State. A lot of interesting stuff happening. And I think people are kind of excited. That's cool that they were able to get the big crowd on that Thursday night up against the Chiefs. We were a little worried about that because that was a pretty big time matchup, but they got it done. All right, Tommy, let's look ahead to some college football. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor here. It is Sports Daily. We talked Chiefs in the first hour, beginning to preview that. Let's start with the Wildcats here. I'm not overly concerned with this Missouri game, quite frankly. They crushed Missouri last year. A couple interesting things from Chris Kleiman yesterday is that he thinks Missouri definitely is not showing their potential yet. Basically, they have nowhere to go but up, and he thinks they could be better. And it's coach speak, a lot of it. Brandon Zinner, who works at 12 News with me, listened to all that, and he pointed out something funny. He was like, yeah, there was a moment when talking about like young players and getting them in that last game where, it almost slipped that they had some packages with some players they didn't want to get to. And then he sort of really quickly like pivoted off to something else. So maybe they had a plan to use Avery Johnson if they needed to, but they just didn't need to. And they're kind of holding on to that, which is interesting. It does back up sort of what we think, which now is like they're just going to use Avery Johnson when they feel like they need him to help them win games. Like, anything else, don't worry about it, whatever. I don't know that the game against Missouri is going to present that. Road games in college football, especially the first one, are always, a little bit spooky, Tommy, but this is a very experienced team. And I think a lot of the things that would concern you don't concern you as much with this group, but it's going to be a hostile environment. That Mizzou faithful is going to be fired up. They do have some really talented players on that team, but I like K-State quite a bit. I like them to cover their number, which I haven't checked it today. I'll check that right now. But
I think it's 5,
I
right
think
around 5.
Yeah, I think they're going to be just fine. I think they look great. I think their start has been great. I cannot believe it's only 5. But it's only 5.
Mizzou is going to have to bring every single bit of its A game if they want to have a chance to compete with Kansas State this weekend. They got absolutely crushed last year in this matchup. Brady Cook, their quarterback for Mizzou, had a terrible outing a year ago against the Wildcats. So, he's actually started this season playing better. And so he's going to have to continue that into this weekend. But I don't have a whole lot of hope for the Tigers to be able to hang with what the Wildcats are doing. So I'm with you. I think the Wildcats easily cover that number. I've got K-State winning by 2 touchdowns in this game on Saturday. And, the number is 5. So I think that they easily cover that spread on the road in Missouri. The other thing to keep in mind is that Eli Drinkwitz, and I'll be the first to admit I'm not a fan of his at all, but he's kind of on the hot seat a little bit. I think that he's gotten some mixed reviews from the Missouri fan base. And of course, you see what all the other teams are doing in the SEC. And granted, the conference is down at least through the first couple of weeks of the season right now. They haven't performed up to expectations. But Missouri overall, over the last several years, has underperformed in that conference. And so, I think that there is a little bit of pressure there for the coach, Eli Drinkwitz, for the Tigers. But I don't think this is a game that they steal. I think that the Wildcats are able to go on the road to Columbia and easily win.
Well, and don't you think there's like some pressure for Drinkwitz in Missouri just because of what is happening in Lawrence and Manhattan?
Sure.
Like there's a clear 3-team, rivalry there. You're sort of competing for Kansas City and all of these things. Like I think that has a lot to do with the pressure there. And, Missouri might be in the SEC, but they don't feel that. They've always felt like they belonged in the Big 12, and I get it. Like they're there for a reason, and they're smart for doing it. But yeah, I think they're clearly behind as a program, both KU and K-State, with the advantages they have by being in the SEC, and it's just not working. I agree with you. I think there's a tremendous amount of pressure there. And look, this is the interesting thing. Like, I don't follow Missouri at all. And I know that the rivalry exists there with KU and K-State, but it exists, but it doesn't. So, like, I'm aware of the rivalry, certainly. Wasn't that aware of how heated, like, the KU-Missouri rivalry was until I moved up here, but it doesn't really exist now. So you don't get it as much. And like Mizzou doesn't feel to me like a rival for KU or K-State in either football or basketball.
No.
Because they haven't been competitive enough to be.
Yeah, and of course, they leave the conference, and so a lot of those matchups, don't happen anymore to make Missouri a rival of either one of these programs. But yeah, competitively, they're just not there. They're not on the same level anymore. I know that there were major expectations when Missouri left the Big 12 to go to the SEC that they would be a more competitive program, especially on the gridiron, and that just has not happened in their time in that conference. I don't have a lot of faith in Eli Drinkwitz, and the combination of Drinkwitz and Brady Cook, at least so far, has not shown that they show up in big time games. And this is a big time game. I mean, they're playing an opponent in Kansas State that is ranked, that, played in the Sugar Bowl last year, that won a Big 12 championship. It's a high caliber opponent for the Tigers, and they have not shown in the course of their time together, Drinkwitz and Cook, that they can show up in big time games. And I think that this is going to be another one. It wouldn't surprise me if, we see Missouri make a change at head coach at the end of this season, because I don't have a lot of faith in Drinkwitz and what he's done with this program at all. They're not able to compete in the SEC. And I think that they're going to, look at what's happening in the state of Kansas with both KU and K-State and say, we've got to do something different.
What is it? Because I don't follow Missouri closely, never have. Like, what is it that's been the struggle, do you think? They've got good facilities. They're in the SEC. They've got a great, fan base and student body. Why has it been such a struggle?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, just poor play, right? Like underachieving poor play with really high expectations. I mean, I think that in some cases they're a victim of their own circumstance. They moved from the Big 12 to the SEC. And I think as soon as that happened, the fan base thought, okay, well, we've got to be, competing for national championships. We've got to be in the CFP. We've got to be doing, these different things. And it hasn't happened. So I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if it's, you bring it back down to coaching and poor recruiting, or exactly what it is, but there's just been a lot of over-promising and under-delivering with that program.
Yeah, it's a curiosity of mine. All right, so KU then gets to go to Nevada. Shreyas Latta, our KU insider, told us earlier in the week Nevada might be the worst team KU's going to play this year. Again, kind of the same thing. I'm not sure how concerned I am about KU going on the road. I think it translates when Jalen Daniels is your quarterback, don't you? When you've got a high octane, multifaceted run game and Jalen Daniels, I do worry less about going on the road. And I think that they're equipped to go on the road.
I think they are too. And I think that they've got, again, they're playing an opponent in Nevada that lost to an FCS team. That being said, I think that the Jayhawks will win and should win easily against Nevada on the road. That spread is really big. And, I just, as of right now, I've got a hard time betting that spread. I've got a hard time betting Kansas to cover it. Not because I don't think that they're talented enough to do so, but man, it's been a long time since we've seen the Jayhawks have that kind of number on the road. It's been a long time. I mean, it's what, like 28.5, I think the last time I looked.
Yeah,
I'm
not touching the line.
Yeah, I've got a really hard time betting that spread, but I do think that ultimately the Jayhawks will play well. They'll win by a pretty comfortable margin. I'm just not sure I'm going to actually bet that.
No, I'm not either. It's too big, and they may cover it, and that's fine. I don't ever, but just like as a rule, bet spreads that high. Don't like them at all because there's too many ways to get backdoored on that. Yeah. Another curious spread is I'm just looking at the slate this week. Texas is 28.5-point favorites over Wyoming. That's really interesting to me after we saw Wyoming do that to Texas Tech. 28.5, and I know it's in Austin, but doesn't that feel a little overreactionary to the Alabama game? Like, that's a big old number for a team that was capable of beating Texas Tech, who, by the way, bounced back and showed themselves right in the light we thought they would in a game against Oregon, which was right down to the wire.
Yeah, they beat Texas Tech, right, in double overtime. So, I mean, I think that knowing that what Texas did against Alabama, I think that this is a little bit of an overcorrection for the Longhorns.
I think so.
A little bit.
I'm not going to bet Wyoming. Maybe I will. I don't know.
No, I think I might bet Wyoming to cover that number. Would you say it was 28?
28.5. Now they did come back after the Tech game and only beat Portland State by like 14. Looking at it. So who knows? But I did see that as a curiosity.
I kind of like Wyoming to cover that number.
Yeah, I might too. I'm not sure. Houston and TCU actually play this weekend, which is kind of interesting, I think. Just looking around the Big 12 here, TCU, they played Nicholls State in the second one, so I'm pretty curious to see that. But it is a Big 12 game. West Virginia gets its big rivalry game against Pittsburgh, which is moderately interesting, except we think West Virginia kind of stinks. The game of the week for the Big 12, though, Tommy, may come at BYU's got to go to Arkansas. That's a pretty interesting game and a good opportunity for the Big 12, I think, to do something. But we're starting to get some relatively meaningful games here. And I mean, we're going to be in conference play like that, in this Big 12. So there's not much else to see. I think we'd all look at the preseason and say, oh, Kansas State, Missouri, that's the biggest game of the week. I just don't know if Missouri's going to get that. Look, the line's only 5. And I've said this a million times. I think K-State gets favorable lines because I don't think they get enough credit defensively historically, like the last 3 or 4 years. And I think that's the case this week again. But it is sort of interesting. I mean, Vegas is, even if they're just looking at box scores, like I can't figure out what about Missouri is making that tight. I don't know what it is. And the problem for me is, like, when I look at Missouri, I don't know anything about Middle Tennessee State. And I think most people that try to act like they do don't. So what does a 4-point win over Middle Tennessee State mean? I have no idea. They beat South Dakota 35-10, and South Dakota's usually pretty good. I just don't know. I know I've only heard, like I've heard you and I've heard others who follow that program a little closely take the tone of, and we'll talk to Wyatt Thompson about this Friday and maybe even Fitz tomorrow. Like, there's a tone that they're not good, but they're 2-0. South Dakota's usually pretty good. I don't know anything about Middle Tennessee State, and Vegas is only making this line 5 points. Like, there's something there, I think, with Mizzou. I'm still high enough on K-State that it doesn't overly concern me or anything like that. But I do think there's something there for that line to be as small as it is, even though it's a road game for K-State. It does seem a little bit curious to me, and I can't figure out what it is that's doing that.
Well, I think it's really just the fact that K-State is on the road in Columbia. I mean, that's basically, in my mind, all it is. I mean, if it was a home game for the Wildcats, I mean, you'd be looking at, at least a touchdown spread, if not more. And I think that Kansas State wins. I think I mentioned this a few minutes ago. I think K-State wins by 2 touchdowns. So I think they comfortably cover the spread. I'm not really convinced right now. I'm not going to use the word lock necessarily right now for the Wildcats to cover the spread, but it's as close to a lock on a Wednesday as I can see on the college football slate right now. I mean, that's the one that I'm looking at, that I've got circled as, that's pretty much a big time bet in my mind that should come through fairly easily.
I like the bet too, a lot. It's my favorite college football bet of the week, but I'm not going to pretend like I've watched 1 second of Missouri football. I have not watched 1 second of Missouri football. Let's keep talking college football and talk about America's team, the Colorado Buffaloes, this week, taking on a little rivalry game. Well, Colorado State, who I don't think is very good, and is the betting market caught up to Colorado even now, as Colorado State had a bye week heading into this game. We'll talk about the Buffaloes next on Sports Daily. All right, welcome back in, everybody. It's Sports Daily. Let's give away some iced tea and coffee. Let's do one free coffee card, one free iced tea card. The coffee, of course, iced coffee is really popular. There's also hot coffee. There's hot tea. That will be available to use at HTO Wichita East. It will eventually be able to be used at the new Derby location, which opens in a couple of days. They won't open out of the gates with the coffee, so right now just use that at HTO East. The free iced tea card will be good at any of Wichita West, Wichita East, or that new Derby location. So we'll do a winner of one of each of those to HTO right now, 869-1240. Jad will get us a winner. Jad also, by the way, Tommy chimes in that he's not Team Traveler, he's Team Swelsey. Swelsey, Traveler. I like them both. I could get on board with either of those, Traveler or Swelsey. This needs to happen. Like, this needs to be a thing, because why wouldn't it need to be a thing? Like, Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce have entered this celebrity status, and Kelsey's right there with them. Like, that they're like A-list celebrities, across the spectrum. But if we get Traveler or Swelsey or whatever this is, I mean, come on now. Like, I need to know what Brittany Mahomes thinks about this. I do want everybody to know that I'm totally full of it right now, and like don't care even the slightest bit. Like, not interesting to me at all. But come on, Trav. Like, let's get this done. Let's make this happen. I know Swifties need a new breakup album. Who knows? Maybe it's a match made in heaven and everything goes well, and we've got the next power couple. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's got to go well, because if it doesn't go well, then man, that breakup album is going to be like epic from Taylor Swift. And can you imagine just the amount of vitriol that Swifties would have against Travis Kelce and Chiefs Kingdom if this
I don't know.
doesn't do well?
Do they have vitriol for all of her other breakup? Hasn't she like dated and broken up with like?
Absolutely. That's what Swifties are. That's what they do. Like, they carry this animosity towards everybody that Taylor Swift has ever dated and broken up with.
John Mayer is a legendary Bachelor breakupper, right? Have those two dated? And if so, like, is she competing with him for like breakups here? Like, is she at that level?
They dated each other, and she wrote a song about it called Dear John. Like that. I mean, that I don't know.
Oh.
Again, I don't know how I know this, but I do know this. Yeah, they dated for I don't know how long, but man, she's dated everybody. Like, she dated John Mayer, she dated Jake Gyllenhaal. I mean, like, you name it. Like, there've been
and
all
so Swifties
these
don't like any of these people.
No, I mean, like, if it's a bad breakup, they're gonna come after that person, and she's gonna write an album about it, and it's gonna.
Can I just say, by the way, there's no such thing as a good breakup. It just that doesn't exist. Like, it's not possible. I think Travis Kelce could survive a Swiftie breakup.
I think he could too, but I don't think that that's something that he would want to have to go through. I mean, you've got legions and legions and legions of fans that will hate you forever if you break the heart of Taylor Swift.
Well, look, it's the fuel for her, for her whatever. It's how she survives, professionally. I don't know. I don't know anything about any of this. I'm really talking out of the side of my mouth here. Okay, Colorado, Tommy, real quick. They are 23-point favorites against Colorado State. I don't really like big lines like that. Colorado State's not very good. I don't think, at least, I don't think that they are. Colorado 23, like, it feels like they're going to score for sure. The one thing about Colorado, and they get this game at home, even though Colorado State's coming off a bye week, which makes me nervous too. It is right after this at Oregon and then USC. There is that factor, and we haven't seen this team do that, right? We don't know how Coach Prime, I assume he's equipped to handle that very well. I would think that he's not going to let his guys overlook it. I was impressed at how, hyped up he got all these new guys for a Nebraska rivalry. That was, I really do. I mean that. Like, I thought it was really cool to see all these, short-term, not short-term, the guys that haven't been in Boulder for very long get hyped up for that rivalry. That was cool to me to see that. And it's a reminder of, like, these are still college kids, man. Like, they're still having fun, doing their thing, going to class, doing all this stuff. I think Prime won't overlook Colorado State. 23 points, though. What do you think about that?
I think that it is a game that, once you are done taking on Nebraska and all of the expectations that were into that game. It's the first home game for Coach Prime. At the time, we didn't quite know how far along Nebraska was. We thought that it could be a tight game, all of that. And then, they did have a fairly solid defensive outing. Nebraska did against Colorado. It's a big time downgrade facing Colorado State the very next week. And so I think that we're going to see an offensive output more like what we saw in week 1 against TCU. I think that the Buffaloes are going to put up a lot of points. I think that we're going to see Shedeur Sanders continue on just putting up gobs and gobs of yards. Travis Hunter and Dylan Edwards will be involved, I think, from the get-go. It wouldn't surprise me to see Colorado hang, 50 points on Colorado State, if not more. I mean, to me, it just seems like one of those games where you're going to see a big time offensive output, and the fact that you still have, and it's not going away anytime soon, a ton of hype. I mean, ESPN and Fox are both going to be in Boulder for their pregame shows just because of Coach Prime. So I think that they're going to put on quite a show when they take on Colorado State.
I just can't decide if I'm comfortable with 23 points. Maybe the over at 59 is a way to go. Colorado State in their opener played Washington State at home, and it was 50-24. So they gave up 50 to Washington State. Maybe the over is the play there. Maybe that's the way.
I think it
to,
is. I think it is
more safe at 59. Maybe that's what we take a look at there. All right, we'll come back. We'll tell you what's coming up on the network today. Congratulations to James for winning the HTO Tea and Brewhouse coffee offerings. We'll come back. More Sports Daily. Finishing up right after this.
Enjoy all your favorite sports like
All right, that's it, everybody. Congratulations to all our winners. Jim, if you're listening, who wants us to go to a fourth caller to have a chance because he's not as quick on the speed dial. We'll file that away, Jim. Keep trying. We give away lots of stuff every day. Want to spread the love there. So keep trying to call in, Jim, and we'll try and get you hooked up. All right. On the network today, Jim Rome, 11. Bob and Jeff locally at 2. You've got the Chiefs Kingdom show at 6 o'clock here on KFH, followed by the Royals at 7. For Tommy Castor, Jad Chambers, I'm Jacob Albracht. We'll see you Thursday.